So, guys, this is the Entrepreneurs Chat. We're a group of entrepreneurs meeting every weekday between 8 and 9 to talk about different aspects of business, different aspects of entrepreneurship so that we can empower and inspire each other. So, guys, if this is your first time here, please join our WhatsApp group, Success Inspiration. The link is in my bio, in my link tree, so that you can get a link when we with regards to when we go live, who we go live with, and what we'll be discussing. So you don't have to worry about a lot of people posting, because only admins can post. So today I'm very, very excited. We are out here with Dr. Jason Msyoka, and we are talking about the impact of potential de-dollarization, the petrodollar, world trends on small businesses. Dr. Jason, how are you doing, sir?
Good.
Thank you for joining us today. I know you're pressed for time. You've got a flight later on today. But maybe before we start, if you can perhaps just introduce yourself quickly, and we can just go into the business of the day. I know we only have 10 minutes with you today.
Thank you so much, Henry. So my name is Jason Msyoka. I am based at the University of Pretoria, but I do a lot of other work around the world. I'm a development economist by training, and I do extensive work, as I've indicated, across the continent and beyond, consulting the United Nations in particular around issues of economic development. And here, certainly in South Africa, we do a lot of work. I do support governments extending to Kenya, for example. We are busy developing the Human Development Report for the Republic of Kenya, as well as a migration profile for Mauritius. So I call myself a Pan-African economist who supports governments, particularly in developing economic policies that are responsive to the changing dynamics of our world today.
Awesome, man. No, thank you for taking your time to actually come and join us here. And thank you to Mr. Chilizi of Vuronga Holdings for introducing you to us. And you are also an entrepreneur, business person. See, you're the chief executive officer of the Frontline Group, a research company in your field there. So we are definitely in good hands here, same territory with the entrepreneurs. So, sir, I think I think the first thing, as we just jump onto it, you know the global trends that are happening now, and I think for us as entrepreneurs on the continent, we have guys here from South Africa, Zimbabwe, Zambia on this chat, Nigeria, guys from all over the world, Ghana. What are the current trends, number one, for those who don't know, and how would they impact us as entrepreneurs, small businesses, and how should we position ourselves so that not only do we survive, but we can actually thrive as well?
So I think one of the, or perhaps the most critical aspect for any entrepreneur is market. I know we deal with issues of finances, which is more of your back end, but ultimately it's about the market that you access as an entrepreneur, how successful you are likely to access those markets, what are the barriers to entry of those markets. So that is very critical, and I'll talk to it briefly. And then the how part relates to, of course, finances and financial systems. And those are two issues in any entrepreneur's life that you cannot escape, which is access to credit or access to financial systems, and secondly, access to markets. In terms of, let me begin by access to markets, and then I'll take a step back and talk about access to financial systems and some of the trends that we are seeing or that are emerging in the global financial system. So in terms of the global markets, there's a major shift going on. And I think that any of us who is a student of world affairs, you've clearly seen, particularly from the global crisis, I would say 2008, increasing discontent of the world relying on just one market, because then you have one bank, the Lehman Brothers, that crashes and the whole world caves in. although we were, as developing countries, largely shielded from the adverse impact. But nevertheless, there were impact. And so there was questioning on whether it is prudent for global economic systems to be tethered on one country, and the political action of one country that then ultimately, not just the political actions, but the mistakes that are done by one country then affects everybody else. Since 2008, we have begun to see not just the discontent, but alternatives emerging. 2011, we had, of course, the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. And I have also to mention that we have increasing applications now going in. I know Saudi Arabia is making an application to join BRICS. Argentina is also joining, and several other countries that are consequential that would like to expand BRICS. And the logic of BRICS is directly to be set up as an alternative for your global financial systems. And this is where now, of course, the financial systems, which I started talking about, are critical. So here we're talking about the IMF in particular, the World Bank, the US Federal Reserve. And the idea behind BRICS is emerging. There is, of course, a talk of a new currency for BRICS, a new banking system for BRICS. And it is at the moment probably one of the strongest emerging threat to the current global financial system. So that being said, let me talk to particularly this issue of dollarization and de-dollarization that I think we've seen as an emerging issue. Now, when we talk about new currencies, such as what BRICS is proposing to put on the table, we really are talking about looking at alternative currencies that entrepreneurs could use or governments could use to trade commodities. The US dollar came into supremacy in the 1920s, taking over from the British pound. And of course, as you know, in the 1920s, you had just shortly after World War I, and in the run-up to the global depression. Now, the reason I point that is because these kinds of shifts of currency supremacy tends to take place during crisis. And which is why now, when we're talking about 2008, now there is COVID-19, and of course, make no mistake, there is the Ukraine-Russian conflict, these are crises that are opportunities for engaging alternative currencies. The Russian government has been a very ardent supporter of alternative currencies, going all the way back to 2014. Most of the sanctions that are imposed on governments around the world, the US in particular likes to impose sanctions on reserves that are in dollar currency. And currently, in fact, the sanctions against Russia have been exactly that now as we speak. And so the option is, what can we do to decouple from the dollar? And Russia has been, you can clearly see the reserves from Russia going way down from 2014. You have other countries like Pakistan, Chile, that have also minimized their reserves over time. But most importantly, you have the major economies now, including BRICS, that are really talking about de-dollarization themselves, particularly in regard to oil exports, and which is why we might know the concept or the idea of petrodollar. Petrodollars, this is the principle of the fact that you cannot buy oil, you cannot import oil from any of these oil exporting countries unless you have a dollar. You have to use a dollar currency. And China has started now to push for petro yen so that you're able to buy oil using yen. You have the India pushing for petro rupee as well. Then you have the Russian ruble, Brazil pushing for the peso, Argentina, Turkey for the lira, and so on. So these countries are saying that we don't want to be tied on purchasing oil only using the dollar currency. And this, I have to say, Henry, we are going to see this current trend of de-dollarization is part of the broader trend, which economically we call as decoupling, where economies around the world are decoupling with the US in a significant way. The US, in my assessment, has been really caught off guard, and the trends are moving so fast that you can see the US is crumpling. They had an alliance trying to join up with Australia and the UK and so on, but China is really controlling the narrative here. Let me come back to the question of how this relates to entrepreneurs. Directly in terms of the dollar currency, there might not be an immediate impact on entrepreneurs. But what is important is the decoupling trend that I'm talking about, which is an opportunity for particularly African entrepreneurs. This is because the decoupling is also driven by what is going on in China. China you're beginning to see a move from a working class, a large country that is largely driven by working class, to a middle class economy. And what that means is that you're going to see reduced the trend or practice of seeing China exporting very cheap products. That is going to slowly coming to an end, because Chinese workers are not going to be working for low wages, particularly given the shift now that is going on. India is, as we know, in the next year or two, going to overtake China as the most populous country, and therefore becoming a very consequential market. But it's also a middling in terms of middle income principle. Now, what this means is, and perhaps the third point before I talk about our continent in Africa, is that you have in the US and Europe in general, you have reducing or declining working age population, aging population. As a matter of fact, in Italy at the moment now, they are busy trying to remove tax rates on diapers and so on to try and encourage more births. So that's what's going on. Now, that leaves us as Africans, particularly, with an opportunity for a labor market. Africa is currently the youngest labor market, and that is a huge opportunity in terms of agility, in terms of innovation. So if you ask me, this might sound Afro optimism, but I think that the future of innovation lies among a younger population, a more agile, but also able to access not just our African market, which we know the AfCFTA is, of course, already in effect since January, but we are also talking about other countries, other regions around the world looking for innovations, young labor, and so on from our continent. I'll stop at that and bounce it back to you, Henry.
Wow, man. Wow, it's a lot happening. No, it's a lot happening. It's a lot happening. And I think, as you said, it's really just looking at the opportunities, because I think sometimes all these things, they come with a lot of fear, right? Whereby people, they don't really know what's going on. I think you mentioned the war in Ukraine. I mean, we didn't know what was going on, or we just thought it's something that's out there. But all of a sudden, we now start seeing our food baskets, becoming smaller and smaller. You now start seeing, cooking oils, shooting off the roof and all these things. But I think the more important thing was that, other entrepreneurs normally, or some people, we are not sort of aware of the trend, so that we can position ourselves, to say, okay, maybe let me get into cooking oil or whatever it is. It's like we're just seeing things happening to us, right? And we're just behind the curve.
Indeed. And I think just on that, I'd like to point out that we've particularly been very stuck on primary production. And I think that, I know it's a redundant debate, but it's very critical for us to underscore the fact that the opportunities, countries like Rwanda is doing very well in terms of ICT. So there are some countries that are much more focused on sectors. And in Kenya, it's more the financial markets, for example. So if you look at, if you compare with countries like India, traditionally economies have tended to move from agriculture to manufacturing to services. But what we are seeing in India is a skipping of manufacturing altogether, countries moving from agriculture straight to services. And by services, I mean, this includes your professional, sectors, but also particularly ICT. ICT is one of the most critical areas or aspects of innovation that we must be thinking about. And by the way, when we talk about global financial systems, you are talking about money transfer systems which require IT knowledge. So innovation around ICT for entrepreneurs is going to be very, very critical for us. But of course, as I've said, in the services industry, I know that engagements or debates going on between particularly Germany and the rest of the continent, because Germany is a major victim of their declining population and looking for innovations. This is the World Innovation Center that we're talking about, particularly in regards to cars, and busy looking for African innovators to assist design new ideas beyond what we already have. And that comes with a younger population. So in summary, we have ICT, which is a huge opportunity. I think that in terms of exporting agricultural products, it's also an opportunity that we've not really exploited in the continent. By the way, you know, we do produce cocoa in Ghana, as you know, but we actually import chocolate from outside of the continent. And the question is why? We still are stuck in producing primary goods and shipping. In South Africa, one very interesting trend, a project I worked a couple of years ago, is some French company that was doing distilling of essential oils. But the essential oils, South Africa is a very good climate for essential oils, which is produced here. And you have the oil that is harvested. I mean, the produce that is harvested, distilled, and then shipped to France for processing into perfumes. Then we import the perfumes from France, and then we buy those perfumes from the French perfumes, as you know, are very expensive, but they are actually produced, the raw products are produced here. If we begin to work through these kinds of value chains and innovate, particularly around value addition on agriculture, agro-processing, ICT, even manufacturing itself, those are huge opportunities for African entrepreneurs. I would really encourage us to think about that. Agri-processing, ICT, and manufacturing, value addition around those.
Wow, man, no, that was very, very helpful, sir. Very, very impactful. I think we definitely need to look at this issue of value addition and all these things. But from your understanding, is there like a lot of support for the like value addition processing in Africa? For example, you may correct me if I'm wrong, but I know there's a time when Botswana wanted to sort of start processing their own diamonds. I think I don't know if they've now gotten it underway, but there was a big pushback, from the Western countries. How dare you want to do this? What do you think? Is there anything still inhibiting us from that? But I know in Nigeria, for example, you've got your Dangote really pushing with the oil refinery and all these things. Do you think there are still hindrances like that?
Oh, yeah, of course. There are geopolitics and geoeconomics that are at play, and this is where you have a lot of pushback because, I mean, these countries have thrived really on expropriating raw material from the continent. But there is an economic principle for every entrepreneur, which is the cost of a final good. So if I, as a buyer or as a consumer, I'm not so much interested in buying, anything that I will be driven by cost and pricing. If we have value addition here in our continent, and as a matter of fact, now the French perfume that I was talking about, remember, you are going as a final consumer, you are paying for the shipping of the distillation, you're going to pay for workers who are sitting in France to process essential oils that you produced in South Africa, and you're also going to pay for the transport back of the shipping of that perfume back to South Africa. Now, imagine if you had a processing plant in South Africa. You are by all means going to be much cheaper than a French and produce the exact same produce. So cost becomes the most essential driver of some of these decisions. If we value add and not ship to all these countries for value addition, if we do value addition ourselves, what we are really doing is to afford our products to the market at a much cheaper cost. And I have to say, Henry, it's a range of sectors, including airlines, by the way. If you look at the cost of airlines in the continent, it's cheaper to fly from South Africa to Germany than it is to fly from South Africa to Sudan, for example. Much cheaper. And this is all it. Entrepreneurs, why don't we have charter planes by African entrepreneurs? The skies, African skies are open now. The AFCFTA is in effect. And these are spaces that we've kind of stayed away from. I would like to see entrepreneurs operating local airlines. We should not be talking about the fact that South African Airways, for example, if it's collapsed now, everybody else is looking outside. No, we need to have South African entrepreneurs with their local airlines flying into the nearer countries, which, as we know, as I've indicated, the AFCFTA has really opened up an opportunity for Nigeria. And I think Nigerians, as we know, there's a very interesting trend between in our continent. Nigeria, of course, is key as far as entrepreneurs are concerned. Zimbabwe is another. And all of these countries, with all these entrepreneurs, what we've done, we've allowed these innovators, entrepreneurs, to go and do the innovation out of the continent. But as much as, it's a free enterprise at the moment, free global society. But I think that if there is a way that particularly mobilize also governments to support these kinds of entrepreneurs in our continent and try and see how we can harness that innovation. But that's a discussion that I would love to have with policymakers. As far as entrepreneurs we are concerned, I think that we need to realize that everybody is scrambling for the African market, by the way. And as it was in just before independence and during colonialism, where it was a scramble for the African market, everybody is running to the continent to access this raw produce, to try and access also the consumer market. But Africans are not really taking that opportunity as we see other regions coming into the continent.
Awesome. Doctor, I don't know how many more minutes you have here. You can let me know.
Can I give you another 3? Is that okay?
No, that's fine. So that's fine. We do have some questions here. But I wanted to find out, how do we lobby some of the countries? Because, at a situation now trying to register a business in Tanzania, it's quite taxing. Even the registration fees before you even, I think you probably need something like 9,000 rands. I mean, and I was just like to the guy, what are young people doing there where there are no jobs and they're supposed to, be entrepreneurs in the alternative, and you've got such high barriers to entry. I mean, how can people lobby their governments? Or have you seen that around Africa as well? Or maybe it's just an isolated thing?
So yeah, it's unfortunate that that it's been a trend where policymakers are not always inclusive, particularly for first-time entrants into the market. And I think that's a huge debate that we should certainly engage. But I am a very strong believer as an entrepreneur of finding where the niches are and circumventing governments, as it were. It's a challenge that is sometimes difficult, but as an entrepreneur, for example, with the AFCFTA, what's going to happen is that whether Tanzania wants to keep business licensing at that rate or not, the reality is that there is going to be a flooding of entrepreneurs elsewhere and not in. So there will be disincentive. It's a disincentive for the country. And any logical economist will sit and realize that it's an opportunity that is being lost. But I would like to motivate that because you have the small regional blocks, you have ECOWAS, you have IGAD, Intergovernmental Authority for Development, which we've been supporting at some point. You have East African Community. You have then SADC, of course. You have all these regional blocks that in themselves, trading in between has been reasonably possible. But with the AFCFTA that gives us now this multi-billion-dollar market, I think that it follows that as an entrepreneur, you'll most likely begin to look at the more easier countries to enter. Botswana, I know, is a good place to start for those in the southern part. Nigeria, I think, being an hegemony in the region, it's much easier also to access the ECOWAS markets. But let me encourage or inspire entrepreneurs to pursue cross-border markets, because we are very trapped in our national markets. Look for the feasibility of your enterprise, depending on what you want to export or value add, but across the borders. The market is there. And the reason I say that, imagine if we had, for example, I think that if you have entrepreneurs with enough capital in Nigeria, they can easily set up, as I was saying earlier, processing plants in South Africa for, or even South African capitalists who can set up processing plants. And those are opportunities that we can do, and not to see ourselves as entrepreneurs from a nationalistic point of view anymore. It really, the market is phenomenal. Ask yourself the simple question, how the Chinese have been able to, it's an export-driven economy, and they have been able to take over the global market in a big way. When China was struggling during COVID-19, the whole world was waiting for China to recover so that China can start both supplying, again, as they were doing before COVID-19, but also consuming. And this is an export-driven economy. So if you think about the fact that you have to, in some cases, I'll give you an example, in Kenya, there are some fish that you have to buy, Chinese fish, shipped all the way from China, cheaper than fish that you are catching from Kenya, like Victoria, which borders Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. And it is some of those business principles that we have to realize. Kenyan and Ugandan and Tanzanian fishermen can easily do their value addition, process fish, and sell in that region and beat anybody, whether the Chinese or anybody at any time, in terms of price. And those are the kind of thinking that we need to be thinking about, particularly export markets. They are huge in the continent at the moment.
Awesome, awesome. Zunani is asking, is this move likely to affect the value of the dollar currency?
Yes, if we are going to de-dollarize, yes, we are by all means going to but I don't think we should be too worried about the US currency itself. I don't think that so if you look at the trend, if history is anything to go by, the shift from the pound to the dollar, it's always a slow burn. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens over a long stretch of time, and we can clearly see the US as an hegemony, as an economic hegemony declining. And so that is going to come at a certain point. But I don't think that entrepreneurs, particularly those who are not engaged in the major global commodities, your coal, your diamond, your natural resources, it should not be a huge worry now at the moment. It certainly will be along the way. But I mean, here in the continent, we are talking about our own continental currency. Those are opportunities that we need to be looking at. How can we harness those opportunities?
Awesome. We've got our Captain B here, who's a coal miner. He might want to speak to you another time as he's into coal. CPG is asking, Henry, may you please ask Doctor if the feasibility and impact of an African continent free trade area. I think that's our last one for today.
Yeah, so as I've indicated, I mean, remember what AFCFTA gives us is access to markets, and it's a free trade area. And that would mean that the traditional borders, which countries tend to put up huge taxes and tariffs and so on, are coming down. And there is a sequencing that I know that the AU Secretariat is busy working on. So it offers you a huge market. If, for example, there's a young entrepreneur that I was supporting at some point, and he was processing liquid soap, bath soap. And he was asking me where to find the market. And I told him, well, FCFTA is on the way, and the market for your produce is huge now. It's not just a small corner in the world or in the continent. So it offers you a huge market opportunity, but also it offers a huge opportunity for further innovation. The more you access markets, the more you begin to tailor-make your innovations and products to respond to particular needs. If you go to, for example, Zimbabwe or to Kenya, mobile money transfer, those who've made some innovation around mobile money transfer in Kenya and in Zimbabwe, they've made it big in terms of revenue. So like you begin to also understand the dynamics of those markets.
No, awesome. Dr. Jason, thank you very much for coming through, taking your time. I know, man, you are very well sought after. You're very busy. So thank you very much for coming through. Hopefully you could make time for us another time as well.
Thank you so much for having me, and all the best to all the entrepreneurs here.
Awesome, sir. Thank you very much, and safe travels later on. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye-bye.